Hey everyone, welcome to the Highly Unlikely Podcast. We're so glad that you're here.
We're going to have a conversation today about leadership, but specifically about church leadership with one of our friends from James River Church. And so welcome to the conversation. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Hey, welcome everybody. Today we're so excited to welcome one of our great friends, David Lindell, to the Highly Unlikely Podcast. And David, why don't you say hello to everybody? Tell them who you are, where you are, and what you do.
Hey, I am privileged, first and foremost, to even be on here, and you guys are amazing. I really count you as friends and celebrate, honestly, all that is happening through Evangel and just the grace of the Lord on your leadership and just your team. Your team is exceedingly gracious, and so that's a reflection of your heart. I know that, and it's the reflection of the heart of the church that Evangel is. And so we love you guys. And just a little introduction. I am David Lindell. Nice to meet you. For those of you who we haven't met before, this is awesome. And I am a dad to, and I'm a husband first. By the way, fellas, pro tip. You're a husband first. I'm trying to model that right now to my wife, Becky. And so we've been married 15 amazing years. Wow. And loving life together. And we've got 4 incredible kids. So Owen, Elliot, Henley, and Calvin. Yes. And so we keep things super busy and do life and ministry together. And so we're privileged to be on the journey that the Lord has us on. It's great. So we're at James River Church. And our broadcast campus is in Springfield, Missouri, but we've got 4 in-person campuses. So 3 in the city of Springfield, 1 about an hour away in Joplin, Missouri. Yeah. And then, of course, our online campus as well. So yeah, that's us. We're having a good time.
Love it.
Love it. David, I love watching like what God is doing through your leadership. I think you're a fantastic leader. I know you're an avid reader too, that you consume so much content, but
love to read.
Yes, but I also just love being your friend. You're so insightful and personable, and there's such a joy that you guys carry in life.
That's
and
kind of you to say.
Yeah, and just challenged by
feelings mutual.
Hey, thanks. And always you're one of the people that when you're in the room, I'm like challenged to grow and to be better. And I think that's why we were so excited that you were going to be a part of this. So we're going to start out. We're going to start out in a way that we like to start out with a random question.
With a very random question from the bowl. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Okay. A question from the bowl. I feel a little nervous, to be honest.
These are just fun questions. So, what is something that's really popular right now that will be ridiculous in 5 years?
Poppets. Like, do your kids like Poppets?
Yes.
So I kid you not, during Christmas, Poppets they should be really, really inexpensive. But if you go to the mall to buy Poppets, you will have to take out a small loan. And that doesn't make any sense. It's a piece of rubber. It doesn't do anything. So the whole fidget craze, but Poppets in particular, like Poppet purses. My daughter has a Poppet purse.
Oh, we have not.
And man, you got to get on that train. So I am hoping Poppets are a thing of the past in 5 years, but it's something that's really popular right now. As you can tell, I'm a dad. Like, what's popular right now? Poppets.
I love it. That's a great answer. I like that.
One of our kids got a few Poppets in their stocking, and when she got like her third one, she goes, "Another Poppet?"
Yes.
Well, at least she recognizes it's too much. Yeah. Like I feel like I'm stepping over Poppets all the time, which is great. You know what? Hey, there are worse things. At least they're soft.
I was going to say, they're not Legos. That is true.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's so true.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, can you, start to unpack for us a little bit? James River Church has a huge presence. You're following and leading with your parents and your brother and your sister. And there's just a lot there. It's a massive church in a not super massive community with a pretty highly unlikely influence. And the way that your family has led together and really just by the grace of God built something that is having such a significant impact. It just fits right in the topic of what we're talking about. So will you maybe give everybody an introduction to James River? And I'm not asking you to brag, but just like celebrating some of the things that God is doing and bring people into that context a little bit.
Well, I think for those who are not familiar with James River Church was planted 30 years ago. And so it was started by 4 families who said they felt like the Lord. They said there are a lot of great churches in Springfield, but there wasn't a church that was committed to reaching the lost, so an evangelistic mandate, by reaching young families, a generational mandate. And so they launched this church with 4 families. There was a retired minister who said, hey, I'll do the preaching until you get a pastor. And they went about 9 months without a pastor until my parents came and they preached and were voted in as the pastors. And of course, that meant they brought 3 kids with them. And so we grew up in the church, and it was really an awesome experience. So I know there are a lot of pastors' kids out there, and there are varying degrees of awesomeness to their experience. So I get that. Our experience was really, really wonderful. I never felt like any pressure about being a pastor's kid. I always liked being a pastor's kid, to be honest. Awesome. So we had a good time. I didn't really plan to go into ministry. My parents never encouraged us to go into ministry. They actually kind of discouraged it.
Wow.
So they would say, like, you could do anything you want, just love Jesus, but you probably don't want to go into ministry. Why? Because even in my younger years, James River experienced pretty rapid growth through the 1990s and into the 2000s, and is, by the grace of God, still growing today at a really incredible rate. But in those years, that was so amazing. Part of what I think my parents were concerned about is, hey, this is Disneyland. I mean, it's just, this is not, it's highly unlikely, to steal the podcast title. Like, this is not everybody's experience. And so we don't want you to go into ministry solely based on what you're seeing here. And I think that, my mom was a PK, like, she had, she grew up in, watching her mom and dad in different contexts and settings. And so they knew that ministry looks different in a lot of different places. And with that said, they didn't steer us that direction. None of us, which is great. It was really, really a lot of freedom, to say, hey, what do you want to do? Well, I went to college knowing that there was a calling on my life into ministry, but not thinking anything about it being at James River Church.
Yeah.
I honestly wanted to be like a youth evangelist, to travel and speak. And I thought, like, that's the gig right there. So I went to school at Central Bible College that has now been merged with Evangel University in Springfield, Missouri. But at that time was a separate institution, went there for 2 years. And I had a professor basically put his arm around me and said, hey, let's hang out. And we would get lunch together once a week and just talk. And so he started prodding me to think about going to seminary, which was honestly something I did not want to do. In high school, I got good grades because I took the easiest classes. Like, that's who I remember getting a syllabus for an honors class that I had kind of said, oh yeah, I'll do honors English. And they wanted us to read like 15 books through the summer. And I was like, no. So I immediately dropped that class and took the easy English class. So that's kind of my like academic background coming into college. And so I wasn't like a bad student. I just wasn't a great student. I didn't think seminary was something I wanted to do, but the Lord really worked through that relationship to push me toward seminary. And still, I didn't ever think I would end up at James River. Didn't plan on that. And then through a series of events, as I got ready to graduate from Dallas Theological Seminary, felt like the Lord opened the door that was so clearly what we were supposed to walk through, that Becky and I looked at one another and said, I guess we're supposed to go to James River. Wow. And that's kind of how that happened. There was no master plan for that. It was just God working through a series of unlikely relationships and conversations to lead us back to James River to go on staff. But to give you the backstory of the church, rapid growth through the 1990s and moved into what is our broadcast campus today around the year 2000, and then expanded that campus and, added on to it, changed things over the years, and then subsequently launched three other campuses in person, and then launched an online campus. But it was the pandemic that caused the online campus to really take shape in a new way and to explode in growth, as everybody who's got an online presence saw happen. God really worked in an interesting way to bring that about. But When you talk about James River, I think you're talking about a church where the story is that sometimes God, for his own sovereign will and good pleasure, breathes on a place, and it defies, explanation. You can't really quantify all of, there are certainly things we've learned and we've grown. And my dad is an incredible leader. My mom is an incredible leader. The grace of the Lord is on them in an exceptional way. You can't hang out with them for 2 seconds without seeing that. And so I'm honored to serve under them as part of their team. But, they would say, that's my dad's line. Hey, sometimes God, for his own sovereign will and good pleasure, does things that defy human explanation.
Yeah.
That's James River.
Wow.
And so there are definitely parts of the culture at James River that I think the Lord is blessed. I think the Lord has honored them. I think they have certainly fueled the growth. But ultimately, God gets the glory for it. And he's the one who's done it. And it is unbelievable, to be a part of. And I'm so thankful for it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like you answered our second question that we had, which is awesome.
Yeah, we're thankful.
Sorry, I jumped ahead and that
It's
was
great.
not my intention.
You're great.
I think that's wonderful. So even with that, I mean, maybe you could even expand on it, but you touched on it. Do you feel like there's any other things that have contributed to really James River having such a massive impact in a place that's not really densely populated?
Sure. Yeah. Springfield is not a large metropolis. It is a small to medium-sized Midwestern city. I think there is some debate about whether we're in the Midwest or the South. I believe we're in the Midwest. But, I'll leave that up to the experts, the geographical plotters, as it were. Right. But no, it's true. It's not a major metropolitan area. And the Lord has brought growth in that context. And it's in a context where there are a lot of other amazing churches. So there are a lot of churches reaching people for Jesus, preaching the gospel, and leading in a really faithful, dynamic way. And so we're blessed. We're blessed to get to do ministry in the same context as them. And that's really, really fun. We've got a great group of churches in this part of the country that are passionate. And so shout out to every one of those pastors. That's amazing. Yeah. I do think there are some things about the way the church has been led and about some of the core values of the church. We call them core values that God has honored. And we have 7 core values. I don't know that it would be helpful for me to run through all of them, but I'll share a couple of them. Our first core value is to reach the lost. And part of what we will tell people in a lot of contexts is we can do everything else better in heaven. Yeah. We can worship better in heaven. We can pray better in heaven. We can be like Jesus better in heaven. All of those things are important. All of those things are essential, but we cannot reach the lost in heaven. Yeah. Like when our time on earth comes to an end, our ability to reach people for Jesus is over. Yes. And so as a church, our heartbeat is going to be like the God who leaves the 99 and goes after the one. We're going to be relentless in thinking about how we do what we do in terms of the most effective way we can engage people who are lost in our community, because we believe that's the heart of God. And we believe, honestly, there are some who would say, well, what about discipling believers? If you're not teaching believers to share their faith with those who don't know Jesus, if you're not teaching people to invite people, then there's a deficiency in your discipleship model. Yeah. And because that Jesus said, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. The mandate on every believer is to reach people. And so that was always part of the heart of the church, as you could tell, like reach the lost by reaching young families. But that was clarified and it has been clarified and really cemented into the DNA of the church over the years. And so that is a passion. I think the Lord honors that. I think it's his heartbeat. And so that's very much a part of the church. The church is made up of amazing people, which I think every pastor would say about their church. But my dad will say continually, like, you're never going to find a more amazing group of people than the people who are part of James River Church. And they're generous, they're kind. Like when you announce like, hey, this is the new initiative, like they're ready, they're excited, they're fired up. And the staff embodies that. And so I think part of what the Lord is honored about that is there's just a spirit of unity in the church. Like part of our responsibility biblically as leaders is make every effort, and honestly also as parishioners. So if you're part of a church, this is also your responsibility, by the way, to do everything you can to make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit. This is the Bible's words with the bond of peace, in the bond of peace. And so unity is something the Lord blesses. You see that in the Psalms, that the way that unity is described is very, very tied in with the way that anointing is present on a person or on a place. And so I think the anointing on James River to do what it's done and to do what the church is called to do, I believe, is that what's fueled that is the unity of the people. What's allowed that to happen is the unity of the people. And we've just continually seen that. It's amazing. So that's definitely a hallmark of the church. I think another thing that I would be remiss if I didn't mention, and it is one of our core values, is prayer and worship.
Yes.
And we have a midweek prayer service. So every Wednesday, 7 p.m., we gather across every campus. It's full on. It's all programs. It's not just an adult service. Because we want adults to be in the prayer meeting, we're going to have a super robust youth presence on Wednesdays and James River Kids. And then it's going to be a prayer meeting. That's what it is. Yeah. And so we gather to worship, pray, take communion, hear a word that is centered generally on prayer. And so that's that. I think probably more than anything, in some ways, gets associated with James River, and that's an awesome thing. So we're pumped up about that. Yes. But the prayer meeting really came out of a word from the Lord to my dad, which was, "Hey, James River is a great church. This was in the late 90s, but they're not a praying church." And Jesus said, "My house will be called a house of prayer for all the nations." So if the church isn't praying, then it's missing part of what is supposed to be central to Jesus' church, Jesus' body. And it wasn't that we never prayed. It was just that there wasn't a dedicated time to really call on God on a weekly basis. And so that out of that, the prayer meeting was launched, and God caused, I think the metrics bear this out, a meteoric rise in people coming to Christ, a meteoric rise in baptisms. And so, and we've charted that out, and you can see it. The prayer meeting hits, and it's like, So, and that's after some years of really spectacular growth that God was bringing, which is great. And we were celebrating. I was young at that point, but the Lord really used the prayer meeting to accelerate that in the life of the church. And so my parents, we continually say, "Hey, the prayer meeting is the most important service of the week." So we say that unapologetically.
I don't go to James River, and I know that.
Yes.
That's good. That's enculturation right there.
Seriously.
Yeah, we say it's the most important service of the week. We say routinely, hey, the church hasn't been built by the gifts and talents of a few. It's been built by the sacrifice of many.
Yeah.
And that speaks to that unity component. That passion in the life of the church to say, hey, whatever God is doing, we want to be a part of it. We want to be on the forefront of it. You don't have to drag us there kicking and screaming. We're going to be right there when you say, hey, we're going to do this. And that continues. Even we've seen things this last week that speak to that. People are just fired up and ready to go. So it's awesome.
I know you guys have such an amazing culture of we get to be a part of this. We
Absolutely.
Get to do it. And that comes across in the prayer meeting too. And my first exposure, I think, actually being at James River was on a prayer meeting night.
Wow.
And I had heard there was a prayer meeting, and many people listening have been to a prayer meeting before, but it was a prayer meeting. And it's not like one guy up front praying and everybody else is sitting there quietly. I remember specifically your dad starting to pray, and there were young people on the front row that started praying before he even invited them to pray. They were
awesome.
They were in and they were moving. And I know for us, that's a huge actually part of our story, because we were in the process of pondering foster care and adoption.
Wow.
And I got a prayer card to pray for somebody in the church, and it said, hey, pray for this family. They gave up their child for adoption. It was confirmation. You got up and preached out of Romans, talking about spiritual adoption. And it was, I mean,
Oh,
it's
I remember that Wednesday night. I remember
Yeah.
that.
yeah, and it's literally like part of the reason that our daughter's in our family because
Yes.
of that prayer meeting and that moment where God spoke to me. And
Yeah.
he spoke to me what, Jenaye already knew. That's kind of how it
Oh,
goes.
man. No.
Every husband's story right there.
Yeah, right.
I don't even think we said this earlier, but how many people like weekly is James River reaching?
Our weekly attendance would be presently about 15 to 16,000 weekly. So, and then that doesn't count online. So, I mean,
Yes.
Right.
I realize we try to be really conservative with our online stats, but it's tens of thousands of people on Sundays and Wednesdays that join us online.
Wow.
So, and I mean tens of thousands on Sunday and tens of thousands on
Yes.
Wednesday night. So that's, I mean, honestly, the prayer meeting online has really, it's been a game changer. It's not that we weren't putting the prayer meeting online, but specifically saying, hey, we want to engage people who are watching online and call them to pray.
Yeah.
And so even through this spring, seeing people healed online, like every week, we're getting stories of people who are coming to Jesus online in different states who are like James River is my church home. I'm starting a small group in my city, but I'm part of the online campus. People who are saying I was in my living room and there was because we believe the gifts of the Spirit are for today.
Yes.
And so often in the prayer service, people are watching online and there will be a word of knowledge given and say like, hey, somebody who's watching online, you've got chronic pain in your lower back and it's been, it's from a car accident that you had 20 years ago. And we believe God wants to heal your body. And then we'll get the story in. So when we throw stuff out like that, we're going to find out who that was for.
Yes.
And then we're going to tell the church, hey, this is what God did. So it's really, it's cool because God is working online at that level. Like it's deep and it's really exciting. And so we're just pumped up about it because we've seen God doing the miraculous in a really accelerated fashion right now. And I guess when you're talking about what are some things that you're seeing, why you feel what's contributed to the growth, maybe that's maybe the answer to the question. I think part of it is just an openness to believing God to do the supernatural in the lives of people.
Yeah.
And we're watching him do it. And it is breathtaking, honestly.
Seriously.
So
that's amazing.
It's really cool.
So I know there's there's the highlight reel, of our lives and like all the great things that are happening. But I know that when you look at something like James River or what God has done in your life and you've come to a highly unlikely place, you're seeing highly unlikely, you could call them results or fruit from your ministry, but there's always like unlikely challenges too, you know? And how, I mean, you don't have to dig into, well, we went through this and that and this, but I mean, I know there's hurdles and there's things that you face that other leaders don't have to face, that other, that church leaders in smaller churches, they face different, unlikely challenges. But how have you guys learned to persevere through those moments or whether as a staff or in your family, like when you come to those challenges that are going to stop the unlikely from happening, how have you learned to overcome and to move forward?
Well, I would start out by acknowledging that all of us are kind of in an unlikely challenge. We're hopefully at the tail end of it, but the global pandemic, it's like, the first time this has happened since the Spanish flu, that's
100 years.
That's heavy. And for a lot of pastors, that's been incredibly hard. It's, I don't think there is a pastor for whom it hasn't been incredibly hard in some way. And so I would start there and saying we're all kind of on a level playing field in that sense that we've walked through the last couple of years and something we couldn't have planned for, anticipated, and yet we're here. It's 2022. Yay! And it looks like we're turning a corner and that's awesome. That's got new challenges associated with it because if you re-roll for most churches, if they rewind back to the spring of 2019, they might have been positioned in a very different way. They might, if they were multi-site, maybe they had to close campuses or reduce numbers of services because their in-person attendance wasn't the same. We we didn't reduce any of our services, or, we shut down for a very short amount of time, but then have been able to meet in person, which has been amazing through the duration of the pandemic, and all the campuses are healthy and strong.
Wow.
But I realized even getting there as a team, that doesn't mean there weren't a lot of hard moments, and there wasn't a lot of, I don't know, potential just like anxiety about how this is all going to work out. That's totally natural. And so I would say to anybody who's watching today, if you're there, if you're like, well, I'm not quite on the tail end of that, so I feel like I'm still in it. Hey, do not give up. Don't give up. We Josh and I and Jenaye, we are for you. And I know that if there's a way they can encourage you, hopefully this podcast is encouraging you just to believe God. You know what? We're all running the race that God has set out for us, and as you're on that, he's going to help you. He is going to help you. He loves his church more than you do. He's passionate about seeing it built. Jesus said, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. The gates of COVID won't prevail against it. So Jesus is building his church, and you will see the evidence of it in your context. But I'm sorry, I got off track. Challenges. COVID.
Yes.
COVID. But during the pandemic, my dad found out he had prostate cancer. And so not only did he find that out, but then had surgery, then it came back, had to have surgery again, all in the context of a global pandemic.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's your church family hearing that their lead pastor has COVID, or not COVID. He didn't actually get COVID. He got cancer. And hearing all of that, that's shocking to people in the midst of a season where there's a lot of instability. Yet the church rallied, the church prayed. I think that prayer culture was a huge difference maker in what could have rattled people. Yeah. Instead, they leaned in, they prayed, they called on God, and the Lord went before him. Like, he's strong, he's healthy, by the grace of God. And so he's honestly, in this season, he's preaching his best messages. He's giving his best leadership. It's glory to glory. Wow. And we, as you said earlier, a lot of our executive team is related to one another. So, that can have challenges. Yeah. I would say just about us, like, we love working together. So, that family is family, but in our situation, I would just say family is awesome. Like, we spend a lot of time together, eat a lot of meals together, have a lot of fun together, and then lead together. And so we're able to walk though and navigate that with a harmony and a unity, because our relationships outside of the work context are strong and good. Yeah. So I realize there are some, and you're like, my relationship is good, but personality, it wouldn't work. And I get that. There's some people, and it's like, it's just personalities don't mesh well together. And in our context, that's not the case. We have a lot of fun together. But on challenges, that was a big challenge. That cancer battle was a big challenge. My mom had breast cancer pre-pandemic, had battled breast cancer, and so walked through that with the church. But I think in all of those, the power of what kind of team you have already. So that kind of comes out. So the team, what does it say? Like, what's the saying? And I'm going to butcher it, but challenges reveal what you already were, who you already were. So, hardship reveals what was already going on in the inside. And I think that's true for churches. Like, the difficulty will be difficult. The challenge will be hard. But if the culture was strong and the team had a strength to it, and the team was leaning on the Lord, then they're going to lean on the Lord. That's what they're going to do. And I think one of the things I'm so thankful about is my dad and mom were leading that way already. Yeah. They were pushing the staff to pursue. And so it wasn't like when the pandemic hit, we all decided we were going to pray a bunch. We were already a culture of prayer. The staff already had a prayer culture on top of the prayer meeting. And so we leaned into that. And actually, we're praying more as a staff now, not because of the pandemic. Maybe the Lord used that, but we actually are gathering more often than we even did before, but we're building. It's like we're building on what was already part of the ethos of James River Church team. And so I think for every leader, whether you pastor a church, and I don't know who all is watching this, but wherever you're leading, you want to make sure that you're building health and that you're fostering health. That doesn't mean you never make a mistake. That doesn't mean you don't have a bad day. It just means that you're doing intentionally and repeatedly what you know is going to yield health and vitality. That's what I know you guys do. Like you're committed to helping your staff get stronger because you realize you want to be doing this for the long haul. You want to be ministering to the people of North Dakota, not for 5 years, but you want to create something that's got legs for a long time and where people are growing and discipled through evangel. And that's going to come out of a team that is strong and that's got a healthy spirit about it. And where your core values or whatever you call them, they're fostering that. They're all working in unison to create something that is so, that's got such resiliency to it that when the next thing comes down the pike, there's a readiness for it. Even if we don't know the specifics, we don't feel like we're unprepared in the sense that spiritually we were ready. Now we can get everything else together, but spiritually we had what we needed to face the challenge because the Lord is with us and we're walking in step with the Holy Spirit.
I love that. I'm going to let Jenaye throw a question in, but I just want to say about that. There's so many pastors that I feel like are at their margin from everything that has gone on over the last 2 years. And there's anxiety and fear and frustration and they're lashing out or just not really sure. And I love what you said about like, do the right things, and get them moving now so that when the next thing comes or you run into another hurdle, you already have those things in place and you're not trying to like rally your strength last minute to get out of the way.
True.
I think it's such a good truth.
Yeah. Well, we want to hear if you have anything that you're excited for in the future, or maybe if in the future you have something that's maybe highly unlikely brewing or coming down the pipe. We'd love to hear from you about that.
Oh, so many exciting things in the future. I would say, we've got one of the things that's part of just become part of what we do, and it's not for the sake of doing it. It's highly unlikely in the way that both of them came about. And that is our Design for Life Women's Conference and the Stronger Men's Conference. Every year, God does miracles through those events. And so I would say there's a lot of fun things in the calendar. Those are, when we talk about highly unlikely, they're very unlikely. The Women's Conference, it's an international footprint and it's back-to-back weekends, not the same people, a different group of people come in to be a part of the same conference. And so that's in the fall. And just watching what the Lord does through that, it lights a fire in the church every year. It maybe fans the flame that is already burning. So, and then the Stronger Men's Conference, I get the privilege of being the lead on that with our men's conference director, Josh Longenecker. And I just, it's just fun to see. We get to do it in the university arena here, JQH Arena. And that's highly unlikely. That's, it's a 9,000 seat arena. And we're, by the grace of God, the Stronger Men's Conference is the largest local church men's conference in the nation.
Wow.
And that is, I don't know how that happened, other than the Lord is just, once again, he's breathed on it. He saw fit to do that and to bring that about. And we're so honored to be a part of it. But I did get excited about both. Those aren't necessarily new. It's not like, because anybody who knows the church is going to be like, that's not new, David. You do that every year. But I would just say this, every year it is new. And I think part of the art of leadership, honestly, is having an enthusiasm for the thing that you do every year, like it's the first year.
That's great.
Because I mean, and I think it was Craig Rochelle who said, and I was listening to his leadership podcast, which is gold, just like this one. You need to subscribe to Josh and Jenaye's podcast, and then you need to subscribe to the Craig Rochelle Leadership Podcast. It'll help you. But one of the things he said is one of the characteristics of great leaders is that they don't get bored easily doing the same thing, or they keep themselves from, because some of you are like, well, I thought, I actually do. I've got ADHD. I get really bored, and that's, that's what helps me stay creative and on my toes. But that the core of your organization, there are certain things that you do every year. And it's those things that strengthen the organization. It's those things, like okay, let's think about the church. We have Easter every year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Don't get bored with Easter. It's the best.
It's important.
But it's important. But church leaders specifically have to think, okay, I have to approach this. I've done this for a decade, or we've been doing this for whatever length of time. But as the leader, what makes you great at it? What makes you ready for it? What makes the people get behind it is that you're approaching with the same fresh enthusiasm, not manufactured, not fake it till you make it. Yeah. You actually are excited. Because here's the thing, if you're not excited about it, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
Why are you doing it? Unless you're saying, well, I'm not excited and, there's some other peripheral reason, but if it's what God's called you to do, if there's a grace on it, then you've got to approach it every year with a fresh enthusiasm. Says, I'm not bored doing this. I was born for this.
Yeah. So
I think that, that's true at Evangel. That's true at James River. Part of the culture of the staff, is that we constantly celebrate the thing that we're doing again this year.
Yes.
Because we're more excited about it this year. It's going to be the best yet. We're not just saying that. We actually believe the Stronger Men's Conference coming up this next year is going to be the best yet.
Yeah.
You want to be there. You want to be at Design for Life. It's going to be the best. I don't care how the other ones were great. We celebrate that. This one's going to be the best yet.
Yeah.
And we believe that and then we plan accordingly, because if it's going to be the best yet, that means there's going to be new realities to it. Things that unforeseen challenges, we expect those because it's going to be different, because it's going to be the best. Yeah. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about just watching some things develop, where I talked about we're seeing God doing the miraculous. That's accelerating the life of the church. And so, and I would just say, partly you'd have to be here to get a glimpse into what I'm talking about, because it's not like I'm saying, oh, we've always seen this. No, not true. This is new. It's just new.
Yeah.
It's a different day. And I believe the Lord is starting something, and I'm really excited to see where it goes, because it's not something you can chart or map. It's just not. God is doing something unique in the life of the church. And so in terms of excitement, in church life, I am excited to see what God does with those things. And then honestly, there are a lot of projects that are in concert with that I would be also excited about. And then on the family side, I'm excited for summer. I'm excited for I think we've got a few fun surprises. If the kids are listening to this podcast, I'm going to keep it a secret, but we've got a few trips planned.
Nice.
So personally, I'm excited about that. I love national parks, and
you're giving clues now.
We love, zip it. But we're nature, we're out in nature people. We love being outside. So I'm excited.
Well,
there's a lot to be excited about.
We're excited about what's happening too. And you said you gotta be there to see it. And we're both coming this year, so we're gonna see it. Anybody else who's listening, whether you're in the region or not, man, we were at DFL, we were at Stronger last year, and it is amazing what God is doing.
Yeah, it's the women's conference I do not miss.
Yeah.
So
and we're so glad about that.
Yeah, we're so grateful for James River. We learn from you guys. We are inspired by you guys. Like Josh said, you challenge us. We've looked up to your parents for such a long time, probably just as you do. And they're just best. Great leaders. Yeah. And as are you. And it's just fun to watch you all work together and aspire after it.
Yeah.
Well, I always tell people I've got great coaches. At times people will say something about some part of what I get to lead in a complimentary fashion, which is always really kind of them. But honestly, I've got great coaches. Yeah. And so they are world-class leaders, and we are just blessed. And so it's cool that I get to say that about my mom and dad, to be
Yes.
honest, because leading together is a joy, and to be on the journey together. So, I'm just echoing what you guys are saying,
Yes.
because I feel the same way. But, and it's fun that you guys get I'm always thankful, like when ministry friends get to come in for an event at the church, or, and I've been out there, and it's just fun to see you learn. Like when I was out in Bismarck, I'm watching how you're doing what you're doing and learning. And, we're always, when you got friends doing what you're doing, you have the opportunity to get a front row seat and to grow and to develop and to say, okay, how can we do what we do better? One of the things that we constantly drill down on is we're a culture of improvement. We used to say we're a culture of excellence. We don't say that anymore. We want to be excellent, but we're really a culture of improvement.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like we're not going to get to the excellent mark, and excellent is ambiguous anyway. What's excellent to somebody is not excellent to somebody else. But everybody understands improvement. We can all get better. And so I think that's one of the joys of like even a conversation like this is that, I'm watching you guys and I'm listening to you guys, and I'm, get the opportunity to rub shoulders with you, and you're excellent leaders in your own right. And God is doing something wonderful, amazing. And I think you started this podcast because of it, unlikely, and he's doing it through really extraordinary people. And we're so thankful for you.
Thank you. Well, we believe as a staff that we should glorify God and honor people. And so we give God all the glory for everything he's doing at James River.
Absolutely.
You've alluded to that, but man, we
We
honor
do
you
too.
guys because we see how you lead, the intensity that you've trained your people. Like we get to be a part of what God is doing, and that's not easy. Everybody's distracted, and but you guys are incredible leaders and really great friends to us too. So we say thank you because we enjoy that, but thank you from our church and from our sphere because we benefited by being in life together. So
And I would say the last thing I wanted to add was to anyone listening, you can listen to these conversations and think, oh, that's so great for them. And the whole basis of this podcast is God using highly unlikely people to do highly unlikely things. But I would like to say, I don't know how often God can do the most unlikely through those who don't have character and integrity rooted in him. And I would say just something so evident about the Lindell family and James River family has been the character of Christ in humility and integrity, which is so highly unlikely in culture today. So we just appreciate your example of that, just in day-to-day things that we've seen behind things like this and in the day-to-day interactions. And so I just want to point that out. Like you might discount, wow, good for them. This is really great. God's using them. But man, your integrity and your character will outlast, and God can use that at any point in your life. And so we just really appreciate that about you guys.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome.
We could have made this whole podcast just talking about how much we love each other.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
I mean, there is no doubt integrity is incredibly important. And I think, part of the blessing on the church, I know part of the blessing on Evangel is that you guys lead with integrity. And, our team is led with integrity and is led by leaders of integrity.
Yes.
And my parents have just, they love Jesus, they love people, and they just love leading Jesus Church in this context. And so it is so true. You cannot build anything of substance if integrity is absent. And so I think, Jenaye, that's spot on. So man, that's encouraging though. It's so encouraging.
Oh, we see it.
Hey, we love you. We honor you. We appreciate you. And we thank you for being a part of this and lending your voice to the conversation and what God is doing and talking to other highly unlikely people. And hopefully David's story inspires somebody else today to just pursue God's call on your life with obedience and just getting better, continual improvement every day. So thanks, David. And thanks to everybody for joining.
Guys.
Love you too. Thanks for joining us. And we'll see you next time on the Highly Unlikely Podcast.